So we are with GridMarkets yet again, bringing you some of the most innovative people in the VFX and animation space. I'm Charlie Watson, Head of PR and Communications at Jellyfish Pictures here in London. We're a VFX and animation studio, and it's my job to steer this ship this evening. So, or this evening in the UK, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. For our poor guest, it is 1 a.m. in the morning, so we're very lucky to have him. We are talking to the amazing Alwyn Hunt, a senior surfacing and texture artist and co-founder of the Rookies, which is going to be our main conversation today. The Rookies is a platform for digital artists to get discovered and join a community of like-minded people. But before we get into it with Alwyn, we have a couple of presentations from GridMarkets co-founder and the man who made this webinar possible today, Mark Ross. Mark will take us through the power of GridMarkets, followed by a short presentation from Ben Hill from Oracle. So Mark, without further ado, do you want to tell us a bit more about GridMarkets?
Thanks, Charlie. I'd be happy to. GridMarkets is a provider of cloud rendering and simulation services. This chart here shows our pipeline, where you download a plugin from us, which will allow you then to install a program called Envoy, which allows you then to submit things to us very seamlessly from whatever 3D software you are using. Blender, Houdini, Cinema 4D, Maya, and 3ds Max are the 3D software that we support. The one next to it are the renders that we support. So it's very easy to submit from your 3D software and kick off a render of 1 to 100 machines. The setup is very simple, and you submit, as I mentioned, directly from your user interface. You can use multiple machines and multiple submissions. On the CPU side, we offer machines from 16 to 96 threads, and on the GPU side, machines with P100s up to V100 options. It's a pay-as-you-go option, so you pay by the machine hour. So it's a predictable cost model where you can estimate the number of hours that you will need, machine hours you will need, and you multiply that by a machine hour factor, and you can therefore very easily identify what your costs will be. We also have put budgeting mechanisms into our offering. So if you have a budget threshold that you don't want to exceed, you can set that, and then we will respect that. The platform was built and is supported by artists on a 24/7 basis. We have folks all around the world who take care of your submissions. And the platform is secured by the Oracle Cloud, which Ben will tell you a bit more about. To get started, it's pretty easy. You go to the sign up page. There you'll see a create account button, which will result in a brief form appearing. You enter a few bits of information, and that will establish your account. Once you do that, then you download Envoy, which I mentioned is the tool that allows you to securely upload and download files to our platform. It also allows you to monitor your jobs that you've submitted. But you download Envoy for the version of Envoy rather that you're using either for Windows, Linux, or Mac. Once you've downloaded Envoy, you then install your plugin, depending on which 3D software you're using. So in this scenario here that I'm showing, the plugin for Houdini has been installed. When it comes time to submit, after you've worked on your project and you're ready to render it, Envoy will then be used to gather up your project files, and it will submit that to our cloud, and it's push button easy. After you submit, you'll get a dashboard which shows the different submissions that you have sent to us and the status of them. It will also allow you to control those submissions. You can start and stop them if you want, kill them if you need to. And from this dashboard, you can basically see everything that you have submitted to us and the status. You can interrogate a given submission down to a given frame and see the logs for that frame as well if you need to. And then as your frames are completed, they are downloaded from our cloud into the folder that you have designated. That happens automatically. That's it. If you're interested in a free trial, go to the sign up page, use this discount code here, 2021 September 14 webinar, and you'll get a discount on whatever credits you buy. Back to you, Charlie.
Now, the success of a studio, as we know, is only as good as its security. So, and as mentioned earlier, we're going to be hearing from Ben Hill. Ben is the Director of Startups at Oracle. So please, Ben, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and Oracle and what it is that you do there?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's always great to be here talking about OCI and our tireless dedication to security. But I totally understand this is simply a primer before the rookie's exciting content, so I'll make it quick. So again, my name is Ben Hill. I'm the Global Director in the Oracle for Startups program. We're an accelerator program that provides resources to entrepreneurs to help them launch successful businesses. I manage our global cloud architect team and I'm based in Seattle. When Oracle went about launching our Generation 2 cloud offering, our approach to security was deliberate and direct. We wanted to ensure that it was architected in, automated, always on, and best of all, free. So how do we go about doing this? Well, let's go through some of the basic high points. More security by default. What does that mean? Well, firstly, we designed for isolation. We've taken the hypervisor and put it in the network layer. So what on earth does this mean? Well, in short, the approach separates customer traffic, which provides better security and performance. And as an added bonus, it reduces the risk of hypervisor-based attacks. Also, OCI has what's called separation of duties, which means Oracle admins have no access to a customer's memory space. And as it relates to your data and associated storage devices, we have full encryption at rest and in motion, as well as integrated backups for business continuity and disaster recovery best practices. So now let's chat just a little bit about auto detection and remediation capabilities, specifically Oracle Cloud Guard and vulnerability scanning services. So Oracle Cloud Guard provides comprehensive end-to-end monitoring for cloud environments by continuously collecting and analyzing service configurations, audit logs, and other information and reporting its findings as problems based on out-of-the-box security recipes or custom security recipes created by the admin. And to complement Oracle Cloud Guard, we have Oracle's vulnerability scanning service, which routinely checks hosts for potential vulnerabilities and generates detailed reports with metrics about potential weak points. And last, but certainly not least, most security services are free, like multi-factor authentication for user access, OCI Vault, which can be used to store passwords, SSH keys, and certificates. And OCI is open to third-party tools, so you can federate IAM policies with your organization's centralized identity provider, as well as SIEM SIM systems like Splunk and LogRhythm via APIs and SDKs. So that's all I had, quick and short and dirty and to the point. So let's get to the exciting stuff.
Thank you, Ben. That was really great. Yeah. Thank you. So we are here at the main event now. I gave a brief overview into who Alwyn is earlier, but with a career spanning over 20 years, there's a lot more to tell. Alwyn started life as a surfacing and generalist artist, racking up incredible credits, including 2 of the Hobbit films, Iron Man 3, Tomb Raider, Thor Ragnarok, and Alien Covenant. Whilst working at some of the biggest studios in the world, including Weta and MPC, Alwyn founded the Rookies in 2009. And we will be talking about the Rookies in more detail very soon. But before we even get to see Alwyn's lovely face, should we have a little look at some of his work that he's done over the years?
looking back and seeing some of those old films, you know, takes me back to the London days working at MPC and stuff. It just, yeah, I was going down memory lane there for a minute, but yeah, it feels like I feel old when I see that.
So I guess that comes to my first question. Like, what is your journey? How have you arrived at what you're doing now? I mean, you started off as a working artist, and now you're helping budding artists and up and coming artists. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, actually, no, I started off as a chef. I actually, when I left school, I grew up in the deep south of the South Island of New Zealand, and you know, CGI and computer graphics and 3D wasn't even a thing when I was sort of coming out of education, and really, you know, there wasn't a huge amount of opportunities growing up in you know, deep south of South Island. You know, I was either going to be a butcher or a farmer or something like that. But I actually ended up in the kitchens and trained as a chef and did an apprenticeship, and I actually moved across to London when I was quite young and ended up working with Gordon Ramsay and Jamie Oliver and all the chefs back in the country. Yeah, working in these Michelin star kitchens. But then sort of came back to Australia after that. But during that journey, you know, when I look back on that sort of career, you know, it taught me a lot of things about being able to deal with pressure and you know, high pressure situations, being able to multitask, you know, and actually just being able to sort of fend for yourself at quite a young age in a foreign country was, you know, it was all experiences. And then I sort of came back to Australia after sort of reaching the sort of the pinnacle of cooking back then, and decided to study fine arts and use my portfolio to actually get me into art school, because I actually specialized as a pastry chef and then got into food sculptures and chocolate and all sorts of things. But it was from my food art that I got into to fine arts, and then studied that for a couple of years and really didn't know where I was going with that either. You know, I knew even in the cooking process, it was always about the creative process that I really, really loved. So yeah, so I studied that for a couple of years, and then that's when, you know, I sort of got into photography, and that's when Photoshop and, you know, sort of photo manipulation through, you know, Photoshop, I sort of came onto the scene. And that was the early days of CG, and that's when I sort of started seeing some courses, and I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy stuff. And ended up, you know, sort of begging and borrowing money so I could do a 3D course. And yeah, did that for a couple of years, and that was one of the first courses that was being, you know, that was run in Sydney at the time. And I really came out of that with nothing, you know, like it was, lecturers were sort of regurgitating information through big textbooks, and I didn't even have a demo reel by the end of this 2 years. And you know, that kind of, you know, when I see what's going on in sort of training institutes around the world now, some of those sort of, you know, I guess bad habits of training are still there, and we still see students that are really not equipped for industry. And I think they, you know, when you look back at why we created the rookies, and I'm a co-founder, so my other co-founder is Andrew McDonald, you know, they were the reasons why, you know, we just needed to create a platform to help young people that were going on this journey of getting into computer graphics.
I mean, that's, to start it, I mean, it's one thing thinking of this as something that has to be done, and there's one thing, the other thing is actually starting that and providing that platform to young people. I mean, was it your own story that inspired you? I mean, I didn't realize you were a pastry chef working with the likes of Gordon and Jamie. I mean, that's an incredible there's an incredible story and journey to that path. And I guess it's knowing that it's never too late. Was that something that was drive behind you doing the rookies?
There was a couple of reasons for doing the rookies, and it was during our time in MPC, you know, in London when I was working at MPC. We got approached by one of the universities, Bournemouth University actually, and they asked us to give, you know, feedback to final year students, and so we realized that actually, you know, because there was like this sort of disconnect between students coming out and trying to get into industry, and we actually recognized that there wasn't anything out there helping people. So we created back in the day, which was called the CG Coach. And we had a bunch of mentors that came online. We had this pretty cool platform. In fact, you know, it was kind of ahead of its time, to be honest. But we had this platform where, you know, mentors would come on and they would critique, you know, final year students and really introduce them to industry standards and try and lift the level of these students as they were sort of graduating. So, you know, and the other thing that we recognized at that point was that there was quite a few schools around the world that were touting themselves as being the best schools in the world for things like visual effects and games, etc. And it was, you know, when you looked into it, it was, you know, based on some pretty flimsy, you know, information. So we wanted to create a platform as well that, you know, celebrated schools around the world and students, more importantly, because, you know, students are the sort of the final product of what comes out of these training facilities. And so we created at the same time the CG Student Awards, which is now known as the Rookie Awards. But really the whole idea behind that was to really identify where the best students were coming from and, you know, being able to celebrate that. So there were a few reasons, you know, when I look back at why we created it, it's really changed along the road. You know, the Rookies has been going for over 10 years. And we, like I said, we were known as CG Coach and CG Student Awards. So, but the you know, the underlying message has always been the same. It's really about helping young people, creative young people get into the industry, you know, creating opportunities.
So could you talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the form of the Rookies now? What does that platform look like, and how does it help those students or good students or people who haven't trained but are just exceptionally talented? How do they use the Rookies to amplify themselves? Yeah,
there's essentially two main areas to the Rookies platform at the moment. Actually, there's a couple of other initiatives that we're working on below the surface, but when you look at it from sort of public facing, it's essentially a portfolio site, right? So when you look at it, you think of you know, companies like ArtStation or Behance, or, you know, there's 100 sort of portfolio sites out there. But our uniqueness is that it's only for students. It's not for industry professionals. It's only for recent grads and young people trying to get in. So you could be a first year, you could be even a high school student, you know, starting to think about it. Really, that's our demographic. We don't want to, you know, I guess, corrupt the actual portfolio area with industry professionals. We want it to be a safe area for young people to be able to start building their confidence and, you know, building their portfolio and getting that sort of global exposure and, I guess, global network that they need to start as early as possible. So the portfolio area, once you're on there, you know, you can be, you know, participating in regular contests that we have set up, and everything that we do on the Rookies platform is really about trying to help you lift your standards or creating a portfolio piece for you. So you can do that either through the contests or being active on our Discord channel, where we have industry professionals in there giving feedback and advice. And then the second part of that is the Rookie Awards, which is what I mentioned before. So again, this is not about, you know, graduating students or, you know, students that are sort of finishing up and winning the prizes. This is about people that are, you know, could be first year, second year, could be people that are actually teaching themselves. You don't actually have to be going through a, you know, sort of formal training process. And this is where you enter into the Rookie Awards and you're competing to be, you know, Rookie of the Year for visual effects or 3D animation or any one of our, I think it's 13 categories. So we have, you know, individuals or group or team-based projects that people can essentially enter their portfolios into these different categories. We're really trying to get students to think about their, you know, where they want to end up. So if you want to be in visual effects, then tailoring your demo reel specific for that category, knowing that you're going to be applying for jobs in, you know, in visual effects. So that's kind of what it looks like on the surface, you know, and then below that, we're currently working on a couple of different initiatives. So one is CDA, which is Certified Digital Artist. So essentially what happens now, somebody will go through training, they'll, you know, get their qualification, they, you know, have their portfolio, which is really their passport into the industry. But there is nothing that's kind of defining the benchmark of what they need to have to be able to kind of confidently start applying for jobs, you know. So students come out and they're all at various levels around the world, depending on where you've trained. So CDA is, if you think of somebody that studies law, they study for 4 to 5 years, they come out and they still have to pass the bar to say that they're qualified to actually practice law. So this is the Certified Digital Artist Initiative. So essentially we're working with all the top studios around the world to collect data about what they see as being the core competencies for people getting into visual effects, if you want to be a modeling artist or a texturing artist and so forth. So collecting all that data, then you know, checking it to come out with the core competencies, so that people that have trained can then self-certify themselves to know that they've, you know, got the information and the tools to be able to confidently apply for jobs and positions. So that's, yeah, something that we're currently working on at the moment, and for both visual effects and animation and games.
That's, you know, working from a studio and knowing how difficult it is actually. And we were just having a conversation today about hiring younger talent and wanting to bring them on slightly earlier in the project so we can train them up and get them on like a decent project, but finding those people and you know, who are ready for the workforce, you know, that's really difficult as well. You know, just being ready to work. You might be an amazing artist, but, you know, working with people. So that's, I mean, that's an amazing initiative that you're working on. I mean, how do you engage? How do you get studios on board? I would imagine, you know, with getting the students and getting people engaged with the rookies is easy, but it's not easy. But, you know, that's people are eager and hungry to do that. But it's, I guess,
Yeah,
with the studios, it's slightly different.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, you know, and it's to your point, Charlie, is that industry recognizes that we need this. You know, we need some sort of benchmark to be able to, you know, not only help students, but to help schools, so they have a blueprint of like what they need to be teaching. And also for, you know, for studios to know that when they see that certification badge, that they can go, okay, cool, I know they're at this level automatically. So you're not wasting, you know, your time sort of filtering through, you know, thousands of demo reels, you know, which are not hitting the mark whatsoever, right? So there's a few, but, you know, there's quite a few benefits with that. So when you talk to studios about that, and knowing that, you know, it's not being run by a studio, which, you know, studios have tried to do this before, but there's always been, you know, not on purpose, but there's been biased shifts towards whether it's proprietary software or their way of training or for whatever reason. So the fact that, you know, the Rookies is doing it, it's kind of a standalone organization that's just really, you know, the gatekeeper of this information, and we can, you know, work with all our studio partners. So just to take a step back, through the Rookie Awards, we also create opportunities with studio partners, right? So they come on board, they say, hey, you know what, we've got an internship program or a entry-level positions that we're looking for. So as part of the prizes, students can actually win these, you know, career opportunities, we call them. And they can be, you know, like I said, internships, placements, mentorships, workshop, whatever it is. So we already have a fantastic, I guess, network, or you know, network of studio sponsors that we have on board. So, you know, we've built 10 years of trust with all these studios. They know that the Rookie Awards is the central place for finding young talent. Like we had, you know, over 4,000 students that entered this year into the Rookie Awards, and we attract the best students in the world, like with, you know, that's just, without a question, you know, each year it's the most amazing talent you've ever seen. So, you know, to have that talent pool that we're then able to give back to studios, you know, we've garnered that trust. So, you know, for us, it's been really easy to get studios on board to contribute to CDA.
That sounds brilliant. I mean, you've spoken very highly of your students. So I think it's about time we have a look at some of their work. If you want to share your screen again with audio.
With audio, yeah, that's it. Let's go.
Right.
So this is a bit of a promo video that we created at the end of the Rookie Awards this year. So this will just take you through some of the entries. So one thing to note, remember that this is all student work. So let's just play this. So yeah, that's just a snapshot. That guitar riff was doing my head in. That's quite long. I forgot how long it was, but it really gives a good idea of all the different categories and just the talent behind each of those categories. And it really means a lot to these kids to actually, get these badges and win these prizes, not so much the prizes, but it's more the accolade, like studios, when they recognize the fact that these kids have have either got into the finals or placed in the rookie awards, it actually holds a lot of weight for them. And it's we've had some incredible stories over the years of young kids that were kind of just hidden away in various countries that we exposed and showed, and now have gone on and are absolute rock stars in the industry. One story comes to mind of this South Korean kid that was pretty much giving up on the industry and ended up going across to LA. He'd spent all his money for this one course, I think it was at Noman in LA. And he entered in, and it was kind of his last big shot at trying to break into the industry. He'd changed from visual effects to games, and he ended up winning an internship to Epic Games. And he's been there, I think, for like 7 years or something like that now, and he's like an absolute rock star there. But it completely changed his journey from entering. And he wasn't even the winner, because the winner had actually got a job after we had already announced, or before we had announced it. So he was kind of about third on the list, and the opportunity came about, and it changed his life. And that's just one of thousands of stories that we've had. I've got.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, are there you spoke about yourself and the founder, but who else is behind the rookies? Who is it? Who judges the awards? What does your team look like?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty nimble. Like me and Macca, Andrew, who's the other co-founder, we've been two for a long time. And, in the last, and to be honest, Charlie, the rookies was really a bit of a side hustle, while I was working in visual effects. It was always just one of those sort of pet projects that happened on the side, and it really sort of gained momentum. And then about 5 years ago, when we rebranded to become known as the Rookies, we went full time on it. And Andrew's been full time on it, since then. So and since then we've we've got a social media person, we've got a full time web developer. We've just recently employed somebody for education. So there's another initiative that we're working on, which I'll talk about in a minute. But we're sort of expanding out the team now, and really, for us, the business model, was always about advertising. Obviously we get lots of sponsors that come on board, and they want to have influence to this young demographic to be able to either use their software or hardware, or for whatever reasons. So they come on and they pay for a sponsorship package to be part of the Rookie Awards. So it's really, it's not a model that I love, because it changes, every year. And, for us, we've been lucky because obviously there haven't been a lot of events or live conferences. So companies are looking for more, online events, which is what the Rookie Awards is, right? So we've been lucky through this COVID time. But I forgot what your question was then, and what was answer it. But I think I forgot what your question was, Charlie. Sorry.
The question was about people, but you went in. It was a good segue. It was about people into the business model and hiring and growing, which is really good to hear that you've been able to do that, and like you say, not benefited from COVID, but it's worked. It didn't affect it negatively, which is so important, especially because, our young artists now, when they're joining the industry, it's completely different. They're working from home most of the time. They're not getting that one-on-one mentorship with VFX supervisors. I mean, is that something you offer? Is that, do the students that you work with, do they come to you for advice as part of the Rookies about that sort of thing?
Yeah, actually, I'll just go back to your last question, because you asked about the judges. So we have, this year we had, I think, over 150 industry professionals that were part of the judging panel. So part of the platform, so when we invested in the Rookies platform, we built a whole judging system that sits behind that. So judges get on board and they can, they've got a whole judging system. And it's, obviously we've got that 10 years of history, so it's a really slick, well-oiled machine. And it needs to be when you've got over 4,000 entries, right? So, so it's the, like the industry supports the rookies. You know, like I said, 150, and it's the who's who of the visual effects, games, architectural visualization, concept art world. You know, all these people are at the top of their game, and they're part of the judging panel. So we have a whole 2-tier judging system set up for that. So that's answering your question about the judges, which, you know, we can't thank enough. And then the next question, which I just forgot because I keep going, which is
it was about what the industry is like for starters now.
Yeah, so in terms of like helping young people, you know, obviously the platform we're able to do that, you know, because we have to, you know, it needs to be scalable, right? So we can't be giving demo reel reviews at an individual level, you know, so we you know, having a Discord server and being able to help people through there. And really, when you look at the sort of the ecosystem of the rookies, they come on early, you know, they go through the sort of, you know, because when you come onto the platform, there's various levels that you are a user type. So you could be an absolute novice, which is what we call our debuts, right through to a rookie, which is somebody that's graduated, they're a year outside of their graduation studies, maybe they're still working on their demo reel, but they still don't really have a full-time position. So in between that, and we have 2 other levels that you can be. So so we support them on that, and then you know, they go through the rookie awards, we create career opportunities, they come back, you know, they succeed, they come back as a judge, they give feedback to, you know, the next generation. So there's this sort of beautiful cycle that happens. And, you know, they're doing it for, you know, when industry professionals get to a level, and it's like me, you know, get to a point where I want to give back, and I know the struggles, we've been through it before, you know, and at the moment, you know, even though that it's a golden period for students to be getting into the industry, there is that flip side, which is the COVID, right? So, you know, when you look at the industry, we've got streaming happening. We've got, you know, I do work for Adobe as well, and I see all these new industries and verticals that are now developing 3D pipelines, and there's a real shortage of talent, right? You mentioned it before, everyone's screaming out for talent. All these projects are being greenlit at the moment. There's so much work on around the world. Studios just can't find the talent. So you've got this golden period, and then you've got all these students that's stuck at home that are not forming relationships in an industry and, you know, in a studio environment, or sorry, even in a classroom environment, right? And these people, you know, that you're forming these relationships, when you get into the industry and you move through the ranks, you know, these are your friends that are, you know, that now, you know, either heads of department or heads of or running studios for me. So you're missing out on some of these really crucial networking connections. And they're struggling, you know, they're not able to ask their classmates, how do you do this? It's the same as people working, you know, at home instead of in studios. That sort of one-on-one is being broken down and not happening. And, you know, I think we all thought it was fun at the start, and some people can do it, and some people just, you know, struggle really with working, you know, in silo. So it's a really interesting time right now for students and for industries.
I'm just going to mention to our lovely attendees that we're 15 minutes out before closing. So if you do have any questions, please send them through, and we'll get them asked and answered for you. I do already have one. Alwyn, what do students who have gone on to be successful in the industry have in common?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, you know, when we look at our top tier and those students that have gone on to succeed, and I think, you know, when I look back on my journey, and it's about resilience, and it's about knowing that, you know, you can be the best artist in the world, but if it's not the right time, then, you know, a studio is not going to pick you up, although they probably would now because there's so much work. But you know, there's a lot of things that are in play, and I think, you know, when you look at the most successful students, not only they might be technically good, and they might not even be the best technical artists, but it's, you know, there's a lot of soft skills and a lot of other things that make up a fabric of somebody that is successful, right? So you know, being able to communicate, being able to work in a team, all this stuff that we've heard about before is paramount. And I think, you know, when you look at that stuff, it's more important than almost the technical and, you know, the, I guess, you know, your demo reel in some ways. Your demo reel is really just to get your foot in the door. It's really just to, you know, ask for that interview. And then, you know, you've got all these other things that come into play. But it's somebody that's really well-rounded. So somebody that can do all these, you know, things that we've talked about, like being able to work together in a team, being able to communicate, being able to, I guess, you know, troubleshoot, problem solve. There's all these little things that really go into somebody that's a really well-rounded and grounded artist. And somebody that's willing to listen, take on feedback, not take it personally. You know, a lot of students just get offended when they're told, you know, their work probably isn't at the level that it needs to be. There's a lot of little small nuances that, you know, go into being a good, I guess, you know, entry-level junior artist.
Good answer. No, I think, and that, I guess, goes back to what we were saying before, those social skills and learning to work and be resilient and not just be in your own silo and head and think, I'm the best in the world. And, you know, I think that all affects and contributes to just being able to work as part of a team and just actually have a bit of thick skin and being able to take on that criticism and just push yourself to be better.
Which is really hard, right? Because this, you know, when you're at school, you know, that's when you're actually learning a lot of these skills, and that's not happening at the moment. So yeah, it makes it difficult for students trying to get in. I think, you know, if there's advice that I would give to students that are at home now, you know, get involved in, you know, there's so many webinars and live event, you know, not live, but you know, events that are happening. You know, be part of it. Don't be scared to, you know, talk during these and ask questions and get involved, because really, you know, again, you're just trying to practice your communication skills and, you know, being prepared when you're going into these webinars, having questions. You know, these little things can help, you know, when you do get to, you know, a physical, you know, a live, you know, where you can actually go to a live event.
Well, I mean, that was always the advice, wasn't it, to students or people trying to get into the industry, was just go to, there's always networking events on, there's always, you know, CGRAPH, or the local chapters, or Access VFX, whoever it is, they're holding events, so go to them and meet people. And you'll, you know, that way you also practice your networking skills. But networking is different now, whether we like it or not. It's probably going to be like this, and which is more difficult. You know, often you just kind of sit around and everyone's silent, but it's just going back, putting yourself out there and going to those events and learning how to communicate this way now, because that is.
So I'll put a question back to you, Charlie, in terms of, you know, Jellyfish and that, with the recruiters there, like how are students, you know, best able to connect with recruiters now if they're not able to do it at, you know, events like SIGGRAPH or FMX or these, you know, sort of more physical events? Like, is there any, you know, sort of, I guess, tricks for students being able to contact, you know, like, is it through LinkedIn? Is it just nice messaging through, you know, that way? Like, how do they approach recruiters now? I
mean, so we still do a lot of, I mean, FMX and those events still are doing virtual, you know, which we will take a virtual recruitment stand and talk to people. I mean, I don't work directly in HR, so they'll be able to answer that question a bit better. But definitely, and because of what we were talking about with that, just the need, we need talent, everyone needs talent. So being proactive is the way forward. You know, if you're looking at mid to senior artists, they're already going to be out there. You might have heard their names, people will be talking about them. If you're a student, we're not going to know to look for you. So you've got to be proactive. LinkedIn, you know, our recruiters live on LinkedIn. They're constantly there looking for a mine of talent. So I'd say LinkedIn is really important. Go onto the careers pages. And often or not, I mean, Jellyfish, certainly, there is a speculative application, which seems like I'm just going to send it off and no one will look at it. But they really do, you know, and they'll, you know, our talent managers and recruiters will go to that pool when we're looking for a candidate. They will go to those people that have already entered. Yeah, it's like I said, as difficult as it is, it's attending those online events. I mean, we'll be at Manchester Animation Festival this year. We'll probably be at View, although that's a hybrid event that's going to be, and so we're still going, and studios are still going to those events, so it's just putting yourself out there, but in a virtual way, I suppose, if that helps. We've got another question. When you first started looking at the standards of education, were there any schools or programs that stood out to you, good or bad?
Yeah, I mean, each year, because of the data that we collect from the Rookie Awards, we're able to then release our global school rankings. And, you know, like I said, everybody that enters into the Rookie Awards, I didn't actually say this, but I'm going to say it now, but everyone that enters into the Rookie Awards actually gets a ranking. So it doesn't matter if you're a first-year student or a recent graduate, every single person gets a ranking, which it essentially puts a score against their name. So all that data is then collected, and then we're able to go, okay, cool, this school here on average scored whatever it is. So our global school rankings, you know, we've been told probably the truest form of global rankings around the world. There's a lot of other different ones, but we don't take any money for our school rankings. It's completely, you know, independent of myself and Andrew. Our industry professionals are the ones that are judging these people. So a good place to look is, you know, our global school rankings, which is on our website at the top. If you go up the top, there's a discover button, and then inside there there's schools, and it has school rankings. And we're in the middle of actually we're about to release this year's school rankings on the 29th of this month. So yeah, I've actually seen the results for this year, which is always interesting to see which schools come out on top. And it changes, you know, based on lecturers moving around and the quality of courses and so forth. So it's a really good indicator of where a school's at any given year. So if you're looking for a training facility, then I recommend looking at our global school rankings.
Yeah, I was going to ask about, do you see much of a change in the rankings? Does it ever change drastically, or is it more or less the same?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's independent of the school and how much they get on board with it. Sometimes, you know, we have schools that include the Rookie Awards into their syllabus. So that means that, you know, they have to create a portfolio, they have to enter into the rookies. So there's really good support behind it. And you'll get some really good schools that, you know, students are either off and they've got jobs. So it depends on how much students actually participate in it. But again, like I said, you know, we've seen schools drop right off, and that's been based off, you know, really good lecturers that have left and the quality of the courses has dropped. So yeah, we do see big shifts, but there are a few schools that are consistently good every year, you know, and you can look at the archives and go back and see past rankings to see which schools they are. But yeah, we do get certain schools that just do amazing jobs, and I think when we look at those ones, they have really good ties to the industry. So there's really good industry mentors that come in. They're always up to date with techniques and software and hardware, and making sure that they you know, and obviously getting advice from industry about what they should be teaching. So yeah, there's usually a common thread with those schools that do really, really well.
Okay, I've got one final question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. But how far off is a certified digital artist concept away from becoming a reality? So I think, honestly, I think that's going to be so useful and a game changer for industry. Yeah,
like I said, we're deep in it right now, so we're hoping to have that sort of by the end of this year. So yeah, so we're going through all that right now. That's a lot of my time right now. And I'll just quickly mention one other initiative that we're working on is actually, because we do focus, you know, when you look at the Rookie Awards, it's really the shining light at the top of it, right? So that's, you go through and, you know, you're winning Rookie of the Year and all the accolades at that top end. But we feel that we need to go earlier to help, you know, younger people make good decisions before they even start getting into, you know, choosing schools. So we're focusing on another initiative, which is around high school students and creating sort of course content down that end to really help them, you know, start understanding you know, some of these creative industries that are going to be the jobs of the future, right? So there's a bit of a disconnect happening down that end as well. So we really want to be able to work with schools and define some key programs to be able to set them up so that when they do start thinking about games and visual effects, they're not stumbling into our industry, which is kind of what happens now. Somebody, you know, just stumbles into it. So, and you know, I've got kids, and I really, you know, do worry about the institute not training them to, and you know, not giving them the right sort of tools to be able to start critically thinking about, you know, some of these future jobs.
Yeah, that's super important. I think, you know, as a whole industry, studios, games, architecture, whatever, you know, it's so important to go into schools, and also into, you know, into neighborhoods which maybe traditionally, you know, wouldn't, you know, underprivileged families, or however. I mean, we work in Brixton in London, which, you know, a lot of the families here wouldn't ever think that this was an option for their children, and that's something we're trying to change a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, I mean, I could just carry on talking to you forever because I've got so many questions. I'm sure I will do after this webinar, but thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely fantastic and insightful, and you are doing such a great thing for the industry, for students, and for everyone. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alwyn.
Thank you for inviting us on, and I'll just give a plug to Mark and GridMarkets. Thank you so much for inviting us on for this webinar. We've got this. Actually, I'll share my screen just quickly because we're doing this this contest, and I was going to show you what we're doing. Can everyone see that screen? Mm-hmm. So we're actually doing this little cool. We've created this little cool character that we're going to do for an animation challenge for the rookies. And yeah, so I was rendering this out, and I was like, oh, this is going to kill me with the groom and all the rest of it. And I gave a shout out to Mark, and I was like, mate, I want to test out GridMarkets. And I've got to say that the actual process of setting it up was pretty straightforward. And once you gave me that little tip about going through Envoy and stuff, Mark, it worked like a treat. So I've got this on your render farm now, smashing it hard. But yeah, definitely worth, you know, and I think, you know, this is the future as well, even from a student's perspective, is like, you know, trying to render this stuff on your, you know, at home and not having options. It's really, really frustrating. So technology like this is the future. And yeah, I look forward to watching the progress of GridMarkets.
Oh, great. Thanks, Alwyn. I bet that's a brilliant plug, Mark.
You can slip me that 50 later, Mark.
So, well, thank you. It's 6 o'clock, although we were 3 minutes late starting, but thank you everyone for joining. I'm sure you found it as fascinating as I have. Please check out the rookies. Our next webinar, as seen on your screen right now, is with Deborah Isaac from the Houdini School. It's the 21st of October. Please do come and join and find out what that's all about. If you want to rewatch this recording, because why wouldn't you? It will be on GridMarkets website, gridmarkets.com/webinars. And if you want your free trial of GridMarkets, again, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You've got the promo code there, 2021 Sept14 webinar. So it's 6 o'clock. We haven't overrun. Thank you everyone for joining, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one. Bye-bye.